All right, this is the respiratory system for lab. I'm going to go through and show you the model structures, mannequin structures, just general overview of all the different anatomy parts that are involved with the respiratory system. This one is not as big as some of the body systems are. And at the very end, we'll go over some lung volumes, and I'll show you what a pulmonary function exam looks like. To start off with, let me give you an introduction to the entire respiratory system.
During inhalation, air containing oxygen passes through the nose and mouth to the lungs. During exhalation, air containing carbon dioxide and other waste passes out the same path. This process of moving air in and out of the lungs is called pulmonary ventilation. In the lungs, oxygen travels from tiny air sacs called alveoli into the bloodstream. At the same time, carbon dioxide travels from the bloodstream into the alveoli for elimination. This process of gas exchange between the lungs and the blood is called external respiration. Internal respiration exchanges gases between the blood and the body's cells.
Okay, I hope that helps. Just a general overview. Computer animation is narrated. It's not my voice, so that's always good. So, as far as an introduction, yes, living cells require oxygen while we breathe, and the oxygen in the lungs eventually diffuses into the bloodstream, and then the heart pumps it around the body. Now, carbon dioxide is a byproduct of cell metabolism, and when we breathe out, we breathe off carbon dioxide and water. If you wore a mask around all day, ironically enough, the mask would be wet because of the water molecules that you're breathing off and ventilating off. But CO2 is a toxic gas and it has to be removed. If it builds up in the blood, it makes the blood acidic, and that would actually stimulate the brain centers to breathe faster. So, anyway, it's called gas exchange. So a couple of terms, well, 3 terms. Ventilation means the movement of air in and out of the lungs. The machines, a ventilator, are very popular right now. Those are machines that would do that for you, would pump air in and out of the lungs. External respiration, that is gas exchange between the blood and the alveoli in the lungs. We covered that more detailed in the lecture, but yeah, it's just simply that. It's just gas exchange between the atmosphere, which ends up in the lungs, and the blood going through the lungs. Internal respiration is gas exchange between the blood and body cells. So the actual, when blood reaches the body tissues and unloads oxygen into the cells, and that's where it picks up carbon dioxide. Okay, I have a separate video for these. We do have a few lung slides. We have some healthy lung tissue, emphysema, which is a case where alveoli have been destroyed. There's big spaces of what's called physiological dead space, no gas exchange. Tuberculosis, which is a bacterial infection, Mycobacterium tuberculei, and it causes scarring and necrotic tissue, dead tissue in the lungs. And then we have metastatic carcinoma lung cancer. So, and I have a slide of a tumor, and that's where cells invade the alveoli and they start disappearing. There's less space. Cancer is just mass division of cells out of control. So we'll start here first. And yes, there is this. Now, I do like this diagram. In fact, I may just include this in what I call our video document. I like it because it's got the pharynx highlighted. But what I did, I put, this was same textbook, it just doesn't have the colored regions for the pharynx. So all of this is the nasal cavity. And so I'm going to point out a few things first. So we have and I'll just go right back real quickly. So the organs, yeah, it starts with the upper respiratory tract, which includes the larynx, and then the lower part, which kind of starts at the area of the trachea. So model structures, nose, anterior nares, and we'll go from there. So the nose is here. All of this is the nasal cavity. This is a callback to AMP1 lab. These folds, this is called the nasal mucosa. But these folds here, they increase the surface area of the nose. Well, these are actually bones. This is the superior, middle, and inferior conchae bones, or turbinates. And we went over the inferior conchae bones. You can see them in the nose. They're called scroll bones. They're in the nose. But there's a superior, a middle, and an inferior. The anterior nares, or nostrils, is that opening there. So the opening to the nose, that part. And then here is now a couple of other structures. So here's see this bone? You can actually see the spongy bone. This is the hard palate. Remember, this was called the palatine process of the maxilla, and the very back part were the palatine bones. This thing coming down that way is the soft palate. It actually raises up during the swallow reflex, and it keeps food and water from going back up into the nasal cavity. So I do have a model that has this too. It's a little bit smaller. I'll point these out again when we get to that point. But that's just a general, a nice little introduction to, say, the upper respiratory tract. Now, I say I like this diagram. The only thing about this diagram, you can see the middle and inferior nasal conchae bones. You really can't see the superior very well. You can see the maxilla here, well, the palatine process. You can see the hard palate. You can even see where it separates the palatine bones. Here's the soft palate. This is called the nasopharynx. Now, the pharynx or pharynx is the back of the throat. It's a passageway for food, water, and air. The blue is the nasopharynx. This is the oral pharynx. And the purple represents the laryngopharynx, which is the area where the vocal cords are in the larynx. And this is actually the epiglottis. This is something called the vocal fold. This is the trachea, down in the front. And the esophagus actually goes in the back. The trachea is anterior to the esophagus in human anatomy. Well, in any anatomy that I know of. And these are sinuses up here. So there are the three areas I showed you of the pharynx. Now the larynx. We have a model for this. And this is a pretty good picture. I gave you, well, I'm going to show you on a model, and I gave you some diagrams that look a little better as far as, well, and this one's actually good too. But let me just go down here. So I'll show you on here first. This big shield, and what we're talking about, we have a little mannequin person. So I'm gonna scroll down a ways so you can see the area of what we're talking about. Here's a little mannequin person. See this? This is the larynx, and you can see where it goes down into the lungs. Here's the trachea, and then these are the bronchi going down into the bronchioles, and the red. Remember, it's reversed in the lungs. Those are pulmonary veins. The blue are the pulmonary arteries. But we're talking about this area, so you can actually blow that up, and that's what we have. We have models for that. Sorry. And so here's the first one. Now look, I'm going to back this up a little bit because that picture's really close. So here's the hyoid bone, and then here is the thyroid cartilage. It's the Adam's apple. And guys, it's bigger in men because testosterone makes that develop more. This down here is called the cricoid cartilage. You see that? And then here is the trachea. You can see the little C rings of hyaline cartilage, and all this is made of hyaline cartilage. This is just a model, another model, that kind of represents the hyoid bone. Thyroid cartilage down here, cricoid cartilage, and like I was saying, here's the trachea. If you turn it around, now there's one thing I don't like about this one. This is the epiglottis. That's really good. That's the part that folds down over the glottis. These base cartilages down here that help attach to the vocal cords, those are called the arytenoid with an A. And then the very top of these are called the corniculate cartilage. So this particular model, it doesn't show them really super great. If you go back to our diagram, you can see here, and I can make this a little bigger. So there's the epiglottis. Here is the arytenoid. And then the top there, see those little look like talons? That's the corniculate cartilage. All right. Now, to show the vocal cords, and as far as the cuneiform cartilage on your list, that is the sides. It's probably the one I would worry about the least at the moment. But the corniculate, little beak-looking things, the arytenoid are the base parts here. Cricoid is in the front. It's that little piece here, and then the thyroid cartilage is there. So I'm going to go to our diagram. Our little our video document is what I'm calling it. So you see this? This is the back. So you know this is the posterior part here in the back. Epiglottis, arytenoid, and the tops are called the corniculate cartilage. Now, in that area there, you can barely see it. This is supposed to represent the vocal cords. The true vocal cords are these little areas on the sides here, and these big flaps on the sides are called the false vocal cords. They are vestibular. They don't have any function. This opening is called the glottis, and air going over the true vocal cords is what produces sound. And see, here's the epiglottis. It would fold over that glottis area. Okay, so we're going to go down to the lower parts of the respiratory system now. Okay, here is a good computer illustration of what are called the laryngeal cartilages, the larynx, the cartilages of the larynx. See up here, thyroid cartilage, so I can highlight that there. Here is the cricoid, and there's that ligament I was telling you about. This is the cricothyroid membrane and ligament. And then I'm going to click on this, thyrohyoid membrane, but we're doing these. So there's the thyroid cartilage, there's the cricoid. Down here, you can see the trachea. Now I'm going to turn this guy around. Be careful with it. I'm going to click on the arytenoid. There we go, super up close view. So back view of the cricoid, this there is the thyroid portion. And see where I just highlighted this? That is the epiglottis. And you can see, well, it's blue. It is a little bigger in this particular diagram. There's the hyoid bone. You see it going around the back. But I'm going to click back on the arytenoid. So here's the right arytenoid cartilage. There's the left. Here's the cricoid, excuse me. Here's the corniculate, the right one, and that's the left corniculate. They're very small. They almost look like a beak or a talon of some kind when you turn them, you know, on our models and such. When you turn them sideways, you see they look like, to me, little talons on a bird. And while I have this is interesting. We've had this talk before in our anatomy class, but here I'm highlighting it. It says the true vocal cords right here, and there's the glottis. Now it's really not letting me highlight that, but then here are the upper folds. You see like that, and those are the false vocal cords, or the vestibular ones. Okay, so that is all of the larynx cartilages. And in our outline, it says structures of the lower respiratory tract. They are lined, most of it's lined with what's called a ciliated epithelium. Another callback to AMP1 lab. Ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium. And the model structures, the trachea, the C-rings, and then we'll go from here. So what I'm going to do, we have a few options here. So this is sort of an overview. You can see the mannequin. There's the thyroid cartilage. Really can maybe barely see. You can barely kind of see there. Where's the cricoid? You can definitely see the trachea, and you can see the branches that come down. These are actually called the primary bronchi. See, here's the left side. That's the right side. You see the smaller branches. There's one, two, there's a third. Over here, there's two, the smaller ones. Those are called secondary bronchi. So this is the left secondary bronchi, the left primary bronchi, the right primary bronchi, and then the right secondary bronchi. Just an up close, I'll come back to this. Here's even more up close. You can see here's the primary bronchi. Over here, the right primary bronchi, the left primary bronchi. These smaller branches, the blue, that are the same color, those are called the tertiary bronchi. They're smaller. They eventually lead to what's called a terminal bronchiole. Then it goes to a respiratory bronchiole, and then it goes to the alveolar sacs. Let me go down one more. Little lungs on the table. Okay, and so this is one of our high dollar models. Thyroid cartilage. Down here's the cricoid cartilage. In this area is the trachea. And then you can see the lungs. And I'll get to those in a minute. We're right now we're doing the tubes, the bronchi. So what happens is you see these little knobs. You can take off the lungs. You can take the heart off as well. So the heart's still here. This down here is the diaphragm. See all this? This is the muscle, the breathing muscle, and it's dome-shaped when it's relaxed. You can actually see the lung lobes here. You can see tertiary bronchioles coming up this way. You see some more here, and then here's with the heart out. So there's the trachea. There's the left primary bronchi. Here's the right primary bronchi. These smaller branches are the secondary bronchi. You can see where those two are going that way. And like I was saying, here are the tertiary bronchi. So one more model picture. Now this one is the one I was telling you about earlier. You can see that here. See, there's the nasal cavity, external nares. You can actually see the concha bones. The nasopharynx, the oral pharynx, the laryngopharynx. You can see the hard palate. You can see the soft palate. This is actually the tongue. You can see a little bit of the epiglottis here, and then this is the trachea, and then you can see where the esophagus comes down. So here are the little C rings of the trachea. They don't touch in the back. And then you can see the branches. Now this one, you can definitely see the left primary bronchi and the right primary bronchi. You can see here the secondary bronchi, and then you can see the smaller ones are tertiary bronchi. And on this model, you can actually see the lung lobes over on this side. We'll come back to that. Same model, and then down on this end, you have this, what represents the ends of these tertiary bronchi. I'm going to go back to our outline. So here's where I was going down. So see the primary, secondary, tertiary, and then I'll show you this now, and then the alveolar sac. See this diagram? Here's a terminal bronchiole, which would be connecting to the tertiary. This is the next part to that. And then you can see the little branches coming off. They're called respiratory bronchioles. So they come this way. And then as they come out to these air sacs, this is called an alveolar duct. And then you can see these are the individual, they're called alveoli. And that's the plural form. An alveolus, L-U-S, is each individual one, and it says alveolar sac. So to go to model, because we're in lab, you can see that over there represents that. Now here's a nice big picture of the whole thing. I'm going to back this up a little bit because I've made it really big. Here's the terminal bronchioles, and then you see the little branches coming off. Those would be the respiratory bronchioles, like in the picture. Here's the alveolar duct, right there, looks like number 14. And then all of this would, these are capillaries. These represent the alveolar sac. So each little individual one of these is an alveoli or an alveolus. And that's where the gas exchange happens. See, there's the pulmonary veins, the pulmonary arteries. As blood goes across there, it's picking up oxygen, and now it's going to go back to the left side of the heart. So that actually, this picture is pretty close. You know, you can see the terminal, you can see the smaller branches are the respiratory bronchioles. See them coming off this way, and then there's some arteries. So now I'll go over this at the end, but let me go back up. So now what we're going to do is talk about the lungs. Sorry to bounce back and forth. So all the way back up, well, let's do it here. Our mannequin person. So the lungs are gone here. So this is what it would look like with the lungs inside. And you can actually see, even on this little mannequin, you can see the way the heart sits off to the left. This is actually called the cardiac notch. See how that kind of has an indentation so the heart can sit there? But if you get closer, and we have better ways to see this, but look, you can see this is called these are fissures, and those are little separations between the lung lobes. This is called the right horizontal fissure. It is kind of flat, and then you see the ones that really go at an angle. Those are oblique fissures. This is the right oblique fissure, and you can see the one over here. That's the left oblique fissure. This is the right superior lobe of the lungs, the right middle lobe, the right inferior lobe. This down here represents the diaphragm. On the left side, so starting at that line, all of this would be the left superior lobe, and this is the left inferior lobe. And that's what the lungs taking out. We've already done that. And see, here's the diaphragm. You can see it going right across that way. So here we go again. So right superior lobe, right middle lobe, right inferior lobe. Left superior lobe, left inferior lobe, left oblique fissure, right oblique fissure, and then right horizontal fissure. And the big lungs, you can definitely see superior lobe here. See the superior lobe. This is the left. This is the right. You can see the right horizontal fissure. You can barely, on this particular diagram, if I make it a little bigger, yeah, it finally popped up. You can barely see in the corner the right oblique fissure. You can definitely see this one, the left oblique fissure. This is the middle lobe, and then right there in the corner, you can barely see it, would be the right inferior lobe. This is the left inferior lobe, and then all this big mass under here is the diaphragm. Let me make this a little smaller. Oop, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, that's really all the respiratory structures. They kind of repeat themselves, because I can go down here to the bottom of this. In fact, you can see, look, right superior, right middle, right inferior, left superior, there's the fissure, left inferior. You can see all the bronchi. You see the trachea branches into the left and right primary bronchi. It's not on your list. You can see that's the esophagus. See how it's coming down here, but this is the diaphragm, breathing muscle. On this model, look, you can see the left superior lobe, the left inferior lobe. You can see the left oblique fissure. You can definitely see the trachea, some of the nasal cavity. We went over all that, showed you this. And then this is a program called Visible Body. This is just showing the larynx, the thyroid cartilage, the cricoid, and then in the back, the epiglottis, the arytenoid cartilage, left and right, and then the corniculate cartilage. This is also visible body. See the trachea? You can definitely see the diaphragm here. And then here's the right superior, the right middle, the right inferior. You can see there, this is the right oblique fissure. This is the right horizontal fissure. That's probably the best one. This is the left oblique fissure, left inferior lobe, left superior lobe. And that's the cardiac notch where the heart would sit. And this is simply with the diaphragm gone. Okay, the last part of our respiratory labs I'm going to make this smaller. So we just did all the lung lobes. See, we talked about all of these. That's a really good picture. So you can see the trachea, thyroid, cricoid. You can definitely see, look at those separations. You can see the horizontal fissure, the two oblique fissures, and all the different lobes. You can even see the tertiary, and then see here's the terminal bronchial. These are respiratory bronchioles. They come off. This is the alveolar duct, and then these would be the individual alveoli. Respiratory volumes. So here's a nice introduction to what a PFT exam is.
Welcome to the Columbus Community Hospital Pulmonary Function Lab. These tests are also referred to as PFTs or breathing tests. They are done to measure how well your lungs take in and exhale air. They also measure how well your lungs transfer the oxygen from the lungs to the bloodstream. Depending on your doctor's orders, you may be doing up to 4 different types of tests today. This is the machine that we use to perform your PFTs. It may appear to be a confined space. So if you have any problems with claustrophobia, please let us know and we will work with you. You will be asked to wear nose clips and place your lips around the mouthpiece, forming a tight seal at the start of each test. Spirometry is the measurement of the amount of air you can move during a single deep breath and the speed at which you can exhale the air. In this test, you will start out with your nose clips on and your mouth around the mouthpiece. You will be asked to take a few normal breaths on the mouthpiece before taking a big deep breath. Once that deep breath is in, you will immediately blast your air out all the way until you are instructed to take a deep breath back in. This test may be repeated 3 or more times to make sure we have your best efforts recorded. Lung volume measurements. This is a 2-part test that measures your absolute lung volumes or your total lung capacity, along with a residual volume or the volume of air that remains in your lungs after you exhale fully. This is the only test that requires the door closed on the testing box. It will only be closed for about 5 minutes and you will always have the ability to open the door if you need to. Part 1 of the test starts with you sitting inside the box with the door closed for 1 minute prior to starting. This gives the inside temperature of the box the opportunity to adjust to your body temperature. We will instruct you to put on the nose clips and seal your lips around the mouthpiece. Make sure you are sitting up straight with your feet flat on the floor and your hands on your cheeks. Once you are set, we do not want you to move in the box. The only movement we want to see is your chest moving from breathing. You will begin with normal breathing followed by shallow panting. As you are panting, you will feel as if the mouthpiece has become blocked. Keep panting until instructed to go back to normal breathing. You will be asked to do this at least 2 more times. The second part of the test can be done with the door open. You will start with the nose clips and your mouth around the mouthpiece. You will be asked to take a few normal breaths on the mouthpiece and then slowly exhale all of your air. You will then take in a slow, deep breath and exhale it back out again. You will be asked to do this at least 2 more times. Following your test, we will be unable to give out any results. Please contact your ordering physician's office to get your test results.
Okay, so on that video you saw everything that was going on. The spirometer is the part where the lady had her mouth on that. She had a clothespin on her nose. Spirometers measure lung volumes. And these are some common volumes that would happen during one of those pulmonary function tests. Tidal volume represents the amount of air that goes in and out of the lungs in 1 minute. You tell a person to breathe normal even though they're stuck in a little plastic phone booth with a clothespin and people watching. You try to breathe as normal as you can. You don't have to know these numbers. It's about 500 mils. The inspiratory reserve volume is inhaling on that machine as much as possible. The machine takes out the tidal volume, so it's only getting what's being beyond that point. It's called the inspiratory reserve volume. The expiratory reserve volume is blowing into that machine as hard as possible. Once again, it takes out the tidal volume, so you're just getting what's coming out past the tidal volume. Vital capacity is all three volumes together. Person takes the biggest breath they can and blows into that machine as hard as they possibly can. This is a good indicator of lung function. Minute respiratory volume is the amount of air that goes in and out of the lungs in 1 minute. It's the tidal volume times breathing rate. And the residual volume is the amount that always remains in the lungs. It never leaves. It never leaves the lungs. It keeps the lungs inflated. Even after the deepest possible expiration, there's still air left in the lungs. You can't get rid of it unless the lungs collapse. And on that video, this would be what a printout from the machine would look like. See, these are tidal volumes. That represents an inspiratory reserve volume. This is an expiratory reserve volume. More tidal volumes. And a vital capacity would be bringing this in and blowing this out as hard as possible. So, okay, that is all the model structures for the respiratory lab. Thanks for joining me.
And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold